What's up, everybody? Welcome to a live edition of Locked On Guardians. We recorded our normal Friday episode this week, talking about the managerial candidates for the Guardians. We both had some interesting ideas there. So if you tune in here, we're going to, I think the links are all out on, they're all out on Twitter, on YouTube. If you want to come find us, if you want to drop us a comment while we're sitting here recording and talking about managers. The one that we didn't get to in the regular episode on Friday was the news out of Boston, which is kind of why we're doing this, because we haven't talked about that yet. So the Red Sox fired Chaim Bloom, which frankly kind of surprised me on Thursday afternoon. I didn't see that coming. It sounds like you kind of did.
You have to have results, and he had been exceedingly mediocre with that payroll. And I almost felt like from the moment he was forced to trade Mookie Betts, he was kind of done. But I thought he could be a hot seat guy. I wonder if Preller will be as well. But I don't know. I thought he was. I thought Kim Na and Bloom and Preller are probably my three biggest hot seat candidates heading into the year.
Yeah, I think Kim in Boston for sure, or in Miami will be on the hot seat as well. But I don't know. I was kind of surprised by the move in Boston a little bit. And okay, so the reason we have to talk about this is because John Morosi from MLB Network and Fox Sports threw out there that people were bouncing around the idea of Chris Antonetti taking over in Boston. So I have nothing against John Morosi. John Morosi is
a Tigers fan.
Well, that's beside the point. That has nothing to do with it here. John in the past. Okay, so I like John as a reporter or as a an interviewer. He's bilingual. Yes. I think he's a good interviewer. He's bilingual, but a lot of times, often, John will throw out some random thoughts on social media, other places that kind of just drive a conversation, right?
Yeah, he throws out conjecture like it's reporting.
Yeah, like he'll throw out random thoughts and think that it's not really a fact. Like, so I don't know how serious to take his assertion that the quote unquote industry is talking about Chris Antonetti as a replacement for Chaim Bloom in Boston. I don't know how seriously to take that, because this is what he does. Like, there were times in the past where he talked about how Corey Kluber was going to get traded to the Dodgers, and I think he did it like 10 different times. And guess what? Corey Kluber never went to the Dodgers.
Not even since.
Yeah, so I don't know how seriously to take him sometimes. And again, I think he is a good interviewer and can be good at what he does. But yeah, the conjecture sometimes for me just is too much, and I just can't do it with him. And so I don't know how seriously I take that. But, Antonetti is from Boston. I'm sorry, he's from Connecticut. And he has had plenty of opportunities in the past where he's been offered chances to leave Cleveland, and he hasn't. I don't know if Boston necessarily is the answer to that for him if he does want to ever leave. I don't know. I'm really curious to see how this plays out for him. I don't think it's going to happen, but it's happened enough. His name has come up enough with other teams where, you think at some point he might move on. But here's the thing about this too, is he's already the Guardians' president of baseball operations, right? So any move he makes at this point is going to be lateral. There's no moving up for him. He is who he is. He's in the highest role you're going to get in the sport. So if the Red Sox want to hire him to this role, they have to ask the Guardians permission. The Guardians could say no. Now, I think the Guardians, the Dolans are good people in terms of...
Yeah, they let Shapiro go for nothing. They didn't even extort anything back, which is, I still think, a mistake.
Yeah. And by the way, if you're listening on YouTube or Twitter or whatever we're calling it these days, you can leave comments on the show if you're watching and chime in terms of future manager candidates if you want us to respond to that. We talked about that so when you are looking in your normal Locked On Guardians feed Friday morning, We'll be talking about the future manager candidates. We gave some good ones. We can respond to some comments on those ahead of the show a little bit, but we're really talking about the situation in Boston and how it relates to Cleveland as we kind of wrap up our production on Friday's episode while we do this. But yeah, they let Shapiro go because for a while, Shapiro in Cleveland transitioned to the business side of things, right? Like he wasn't
He was still technically the president. He was still technically at the top. They could have tried to get something back and they let multiple pieces go. It's still kind of a little weird to me that they didn't try to get anything. But
his last couple of years in Cleveland, he was focusing on the business side of things. He wasn't making baseball decisions. He turned that over to Antonetti, and then Shapiro decided he wanted to get back into baseball decisions. So that's why they let him go to Toronto. But you're right. They didn't ask for anything. They just let him go. And he, like I said, Antonetti can't really move up. It would only be a lateral move for him, but he would have to decide if it's the right answer for him. So again, with John Morosi throwing that out there, it's a lot of conjecture. I wouldn't necessarily put it in the guaranteed category yet just because he said it, because this is what John's done in the past with a lot. And again, I say that with no disrespect to John because I do enjoy his work, but I do think he says a lot of things sometimes just to start a conversation.
Yeah, he tries to start a conversation. There's definitely been points where, like, specifically when it comes to Cleveland, he's been a little bit more, I'm not saying I want to say negative, but a little, not even antagonistic, but it does feel like sometimes some of the statements are not as measured.
I just think he does whatever he says, certain things out there. He's the kind of guy who will take like chatter and report it as a rumor or more because it drives conversation on his radio show or his MLB network or whatever. Like, especially in the off season, like when you get to the off season, there isn't a whole lot going on. Maybe the news wire is dead. He might make speculation up. Not, I'm saying make it up, but he might make things into more than they really are. And just because they need to have the topic for the show. So that's why I think some of the stuff with Antonetti in Boston kind of falls into that. I'm not really sure, but I don't know. Like I said, Cleveland, if Chris Antonetti, like I say, he's from Connecticut, if he really wanted to go to the Red Sox, I'm sure the Dolans would let him go. Probably. They probably would, but I don't know 100%. How seriously I take the interest right now, if there is any interest.
Yeah, well, we kind of saw it with Chernoff to a degree, right? Wasn't he a New York guy who decided it was better to
His dad's a radio host in New York, I think.
Yeah, it's it's one of those things where sometimes people, knowing what's comfortable, knowing what's available, it's a good situation. People want to stay in.
Well, we already agreed. Well, we already saw that David Stearns is already the GM, or I'm sorry, president of baseball operations in New York. So there is that. You don't have to worry about that, right? That's already happening. And we were saying too on the Friday episode of Locked On Guardians that we think that Craig Counsell is leaving Milwaukee to go to New York to follow
David Stearns. That's the only place he'd really go.
I don't see him going anywhere else. We kind of rolled out Craig Counsell as a potential option as a manager candidate for Cleveland because we think he'll follow David Stearns to New York. And why wouldn't you go to the Mets? It's a better situation. You follow a GM you already know, and you go to a situation where you're going to get plenty of talent. It's a great market. It's a tough market, but it's a competitive market. I don't see why you come to Cleveland, but that's already been solved. I would not be surprised if, I don't know, who is the GM in New York right now? Is it Billy Epler?
Yeah, who's been kind of bad in multiple. I think he's going to struggle to find another job.
Yeah, it wouldn't shock me if Stearns comes in and decides he's going to get rid of Epler. Yeah. So then you're talking about, well, okay, nobody from Cleveland might go there because Antonetti won't become a GM, and from a president of baseball operations, Chernoff won't leave for a lateral job. Yeah. I did see.
I wonder if he runs, get some of our old friends from Milwaukee and takes them to New York.
Yeah, I could see that. I could definitely see that. That happens all the time. Yeah, like what happens if, let's say, Antonetti decides to go to Boston? I don't think he'd take anybody with him. I know Shapiro took some guys to Toronto.
I bet he would take a guy or two. That's just the
Maybe
way
I
of
don't see it. I did see a couple of respected Red Sox reporters on Twitter or X, whatever.
No such thing.
I did see them.
I'm kidding.
Yeah, Rob Bradford. I really like him. I did see him mention James Harris as a candidate. So James Harris is now an assistant. Yeah, he's an assistant GM for the Guardians. He started out as the director of player, started out in the player development group, then he became the director of player development or vice president of player development. Now he's an AGM. He has interviewed with the Astros and the Cubs. He was actually a final. I want to say he was a finalist for the Cubs job before.
Yes, I believe he was one of the 3 finalists.
Yeah, before what's the guy's name went to the Cubs? I can't think of his name. Who's their GM?
Right now it's Hawkins, right? Carter Hawkins.
Carter Hawkins, yeah. So James Harris was a finalist with Carter Hawkins for the Cubs job. So Hawkins got that, obviously, and James Harris stayed here. I do think it's a matter of time for James Harris to get another job. So James Harris to the Red Sox would make a lot of sense to me. And, I think that there was some talk, too, about Alex Cora in Boston being elevated to the GM/baseball operations job, which would open his managerial position to somebody as well. That's why the Veritek thing might have made some sense. We talked about Jason Veritek a little bit as a potential manager for the Guardians in the future. So I don't know. Alex Cora could be promoted into the front office from.
He just feels
the
like
Red
such a net negative.
Yeah, I think James Harris makes a really good candidate. You know who we didn't think about too? James Click, who was the Astros manager that was unceremoniously let go.
That might be a target.
Yeah, I could see that being a target in.
The Astros do need a potentially new GM. So.
Oh, I'm sure they will. Yeah.
So just bring back James Click for them. I'm kidding.
They should. No, I think James Click could go to the Red Sox too. He could be a candidate.
No, yeah, I was just being a jerk.
What else is new?
No, it's my skill set. But I think I'll be very curious. I mean, is Dana Brown kind of like the GM for the Astros this year? Very well-regarded guy from.
He is. I feel like Jim Crane controls a lot of that.
Yeah. No, agreed.
Which is weird. I wouldn't want to go to that either. It's very strange how that works out.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. I know there was and we had this discussion off air, but there's definitely some people who thought that, James Click and the Astros might get David Stearns. And I always thought it'd be 100% he was going to New York. I mean, having been from the area and that, but like at the end of the day, after what happened to James Click, if you're a respected GM, do you want any?
I wouldn't go to. No, I would not go to Houston. Absolutely not.
Like I don't think you have to worry about anyone from Cleveland going there unless it's someone who wants that opportunity. But I think they're a good team. Don't get me wrong, and they're set up very well thanks to what James Click did. But again, James Click's treatment is going to make that a job that isn't as attractive as it should be.
I was kind of surprised that Harris interviewed there because I didn't think it would be it wasn't a good way to go for him, but he ended up not getting it. But
I'm also really go ahead. Doing everyone's favorite thing and interrupting you.
Well, this is a bonus free flowing episode, so it doesn't really matter. But I do feel better about him not going to Houston. I just think it's better for him to go work for somebody that is easier to work for. And I think the Red Sox would be a good fit for him. And although I don't know, like I don't think that Chaim Bloom should have been fired either. They forced him to trade Mookie Betts. They forced him to come in under the luxury tax a certain amount. I know he didn't do well in the Mookie Betts trade, but you know what? That's on the ownership for saying we have to trade him.
I think it also kind of is one of those things. I think they thought the prospects would be better by now, and there are some interesting ones, but I don't know if it's. You look at the state of that team, and I was kind of.
They've got some good hitting prospects in the minors. I like their farm system as far as.
But it's like
position players.
You can't go to Boston and New York and be last multiple years in a row. Right now, they're below, in all the Yankee struggles. They're below the Yankees again. They are last in that division, and that's going to get you fired every time. And unfortunately for him, they're in that situation. That that lineup is exceedingly mid. I was going through because the whole idea is like if they go a full on rebuild, it's like people are going to ask. Alex Verdugo is in his final year, and he's not that good. Like he's Stephen
He's
Kwan.
mid.
Yeah,
Yeah, he's mid.
he's without the defense and a little more pop. And then Yoshida turned 30 this year. His defensive ratings are comical. His sprint speed is bad. Now he does fit the size, contact,
He makes quite a bit of money.
But if he just doesn't make sense with this particular team. So even if they went full rebuild, I just don't see anything where you see a deal. The other team that's kind of interesting, they already hired someone, so they're not going to chase any like James Harris, but the White Sox keeping everything internal.
Oh Lord, I know.
Doing what they did. And part of me thinks they went internal so they wouldn't get a new GM and have to fire their coach. And they also went internal because they're already paying. So basically, Reinsdorf doesn't have to pay. Yeah, he doesn't want to pay. Like this was all about saving more money on, hey, we're going to be bad anyway, so why should I pay for anything? Reinsdorf is so cheap. I think that is what it is. Because, I mean, honestly, Harris would have made perfect sense there. Did he come from the White Sox at one point in time? I'm trying to remember where he started.
James Harris? No, James Harris had a football background. He worked for the...
he was with another team before he came to Cleveland.
Was he? I remember him from the Oregon Ducks or the...
He was. I'm gonna try to pull up his LinkedIn.
He worked for the Philadelphia Eagles, too? Did I remember that right?
He was with the Eagles.
He had more of a football background before he came to Cleveland.
I think this could be it.
I mean, this could be the year he finally gets a GM job. I think it's been.
He was with the Pirates. That's what it was. He was a special assistant to baseball operations for the Pittsburgh Pirates. I knew he had been with another organization before he came here. I just couldn't remember which. It was the Pirates was the organization. So yeah, he was with the Phillies for 3 years before that, and Oregon for 5 years before that. But yeah, he came to Cleveland from the Pirates. I knew it was just interesting because at the time they didn't do a lot of external hires from other organizations, so it just stood out. So yeah.
I mean, I'm really curious how this goes in Boston. I like we started in the beginning. People who probably haven't been on here the whole time. I don't think if you're watching live on YouTube or Twitter. Again, you can feel free to drop us a comment or a question. Friday mornings episode, we'll have all of our thoughts on future Guardians managers. We had a very long talk about guys we think are good.
Show.
The whole show is just on future Guardians manager candidates, whether we think they're a good fit, not a fit, some qualities, some attributes, guys you should be thinking about, guys that if you're thinking about that aren't guys you should be thinking about. But we didn't get to the comments from a bunch of media people in Boston talking about who will take over in Boston when Chaim Bloom has been fired. And again, I'll go back to this. John Morosi, I'm not gonna say he threw a bomb out there, but at least stirred. I don't know how much to believe. He said, "quote unquote" industry. Talking the industry had something to do with Chris Anthony taking over there. And I would take that with a grain of salt. It could be just him stirring up conversation. It doesn't feel like a very report. They're interested in Chris Antonetti because I think obviously they would be interested in him no matter what. But I wouldn't take that as a serious thing. Not at this time. It could develop into something serious, but at this time I wouldn't take it as anything seriously. But I don't know. I do think that Bloom was their president of baseball operations. So they have a GM below him, which I think is Brian O'Halloran is their GM below him. So I would guess if Bloom is fired, everyone's fired, right? O'Halloran, everybody, you're gonna blow up the entire front office, right?
I think so. I think this is, especially if you're pulling the ripcord this early, that it is going to be a situation where they have no faith.
Yeah. And I don't know about Alex Cora. I mean, he was pretty non-committal in his comments to the media about the firing, and he didn't, he said, I'm going to finish up this year, and then whatever happens next year happens next year. He was very non-committal. So I think he probably feels like he might get let go too. So maybe we both expressed no interest in him as a Guardians manager.
Yeah.
Anyway, doesn't make a whole lot of sense for the Guardians, and he has, you know, the cheating scandal in the background too, which we don't really like. But you know, it wouldn't surprise me if someone from Cleveland ends up in Boston, whether it's a president of baseball operations or they could hire Mike Chernoff, right? Mike Chernoff, it would not be a lateral move if they wanted to hire him as the president of baseball operations. Cleveland couldn't stop him because it would be a promotion, right? So they could go up to Chernoff. Nobody wanted to work out of the Mets, you know, because Chernoff and Antonetti, I think, were both desired by the Mets at one time. But at the time, it was the previous owner, right, before Steve Cohen. And everyone knew that the Mets were toxic. Nobody wanted to work there. So the Guardians candidates were like, yeah, no, we're good. I don't know how they'd feel about Boston. I don't take the Antonetti thing as like anything serious right now. Maybe it could be developed into something serious, but like we talked about, James Harris can wind up being a candidate there. Somebody from Boston mentioned him in terms of being a reporter. I think he makes a lot of sense. But yeah, it's interesting.
You know, for me, I think it's when you look at that Boston situation, again, it's not a great roster. It's high expectations, and the minors are good, but they're not great. We're not talking like a top 5, top 10, which is, you know, a team that's had some relatively high picks. So I think
they have no pitching prospects at all.
It's like, okay, so you got Tristan Casas, who's had a really good year, but everyone else you're hoping is gonna come together, and we just don't have.
Yeah.
I do see in chat we have from one of our everydayers, DB Collins, with all the offensive woes. Should Cleveland be looking for a better hitting coach than Valaika? The entire team is too aggressive at swinging pitches out of the strike zone. Yeah, the thing with hitting coaches is it's really hard to say the impact that they have. I don't know. But I will say, like with the managerial talk, we definitely talk about hitting coaches. So, it's one of those things that
I wonder how much they will. Will a new manager will they want to hire a new manager that will keep some of the staff intact? They want some more continuity, or will they have a whole new staff under the manager? Because I think there's a chance that they could hire someone that would keep some continuity here in terms of coaches. It wouldn't shock me.
Yeah, no, I could definitely see that. And it's part of what we discussed, right? That like they could totally be one of those things where they look for someone who has some ties to what they've already done and some ties to the team overall. But it will be, if you're a coach at the same time, how much do you want someone else's people? Like, this is your job. You probably want the people you know and you trust.
I mean, they're going to wind up hiring somebody who it's going to be the same situation as Tito. It's going to be a collaborative effort. They're going to want someone that works with them in tandem in the front office, where they, have a good relationship. There's a lot of communication and they do things together. I mean, everybody loves, this is what I don't understand. People don't listen. People talk about, the front office, that needs to take players away from Tito, or Tito does this, or Tito does that, and the front office needs to change this, or Tito does this to show the front office that. They always push how well they work together. And I maybe you can say I'm naive, but I believe that. I think it's ridiculous to assume that Tito makes decisions to show the front office something, or the front office took players away from Tito so he couldn't play them. Sorry, I buy it when they say that.
It feels a little bit that way with Ahmed.
Yeah, but there's a lot of other past things that have happened where it was the reverse. Like, there was a lot, like, previously Tito wanted Bobby Bradley up before the front office brought him up. Like, there was that side of things. I buy 99% of the time they are in lockstep.
Yeah, no, I agree. They're definitely together.
Yeah, so people who sit there and say, like, they do things to be at odds with each other or show each other, but and I think that they work together in tandem. They like working together. They've talked about it, and they're going to try to find the same situation in a new manager. So that wouldn't shock me if they bring somebody in who wants to maintain some sort of continuity, because this is what this team's always done. They want to try to have as little turnover as possible, right? Whenever someone gets hired away, like Derek Falvey, who's the president of baseball operations in Minnesota, right? The Guardians just promoted from within. Carter Hawkins leaves, you promote somebody from within. Matt Blake, Ruben Niebla. What's the last time this organization? Chris Vlaka was the only really outside of the organization hire, right? Like everybody else has been internal. Carl Willis, even when he was no longer with Cleveland, he was with them previously, right? Like when he took over for Mickey, he was at least a previous coach here. So they strive for low turnover.
Yeah, no, they definitely have they like to keep things not concurrent continuity. Yeah, I agree. I think that's one of those things that they like doing. Now that we've hit about 11 o'clock, I think it's a bit of a slow night for the chat. Should we maybe call this a bonus episode?
Yeah, we're almost a half hour in at this point. We've kind of covered the entire topic of the Boston thing and Antonetti's connection to that. We've pretty much talked about that, and yeah. So if you're listening to this and you haven't listened to Friday's episode yet, it's a full episode on managers, potential future managers, and guys we like, guys that, you know, people maybe are overrating, and some qualities and skills we like in a future manager too.
I want to thank you to DB Collins for joining us this evening, one of our everydayers. And thank you to each and every one of you who are checking this out at a later point in time, enjoying kind of a chill evening of baseball chatter on a day where there is no game. So thank you all to joining in. We appreciate you. And I guess I'll do the Go Guardians Go.